Welcome to the Ellevate podcast, conversations with women changing the face of business. And now your hosts, Kristy, Wallace, and Maricella, Herrera.
Hello and welcome to the Ellevate podcast. This is your host, Kristy Wallace, with my co-host, Maricella Herrera. Hi, Maricella. How you doing?
Hi, Kristy. I'm great. I just got puked on by my baby nephew, but other than that, I'm great.
Yep, that's par for the course, but at least it wasn't like adult puke or something.
Oh yeah, I would be screaming if it was adult puke. Baby puke, I'm used to. It's okay. It's okay, right, buddy?
So special you're getting this time with Sebastian. And he joined one of our team Zooms today. That was really fun too.
Yeah, he went to our team leads meeting, had many opinions.
Of course, Well, we had a few.
It's in the family
popping in, so I think it's always great when kids, regardless of their cognitive stage, see strong women working and taking over the world.
Yeah, he's got some really good role models, I will say, and not just talking about me. His mom is awesome, and his dada is like amazing. So,
yay. Yes, good role models. We love that. It reminds me a bit of this article I was reading this week, which like, it's not so much about role models, but it's just about kind of having that support network. And I was thinking about you actually, Maricella, because I know, and we've talked about it on the podcast, during the pandemic, you didn't get a chance to see your family all that much, and now you're making up for it and spending some great time in the UK and with Sebastian. But this article I was reading was talking about how after so many months and years of lockdowns and social isolation, that it's really had an impact on people. That we're striving for that in-person connection, but yet at the same time, like, not sure how to approach it anymore, and just struggling with this whole transition from, where do we go from Zoom, and how do we, lean into community and connections and relationship building in ways that we haven't been able to in the past couple of years.
Yeah, I mean, I had my 10-year business school reunion a couple months ago, and I didn't know how to it was kind of overwhelming to all these people I hadn't seen in 10 years. In the last 2 years, I've been like hanging out with the same like little pod or just doing everything via Zoom. And now, like, how do you interact again with people? How do you get to know people, new people around? It was hard.
Yeah, that happened to me last week, kind of a different way. I was invited to like 4 different in-person events. One was a dinner with a friend. The other one was like fundraiser. There was another networking type event, a Tribeca film premiere. I mean, there's just 4 different things. And well, yes, I am super fancy. But it really gave me pause, because I used to, I would be out every night, at the networking event or a dinner or whatever it was. Like, I always had something planned, didn't think twice about it. Leave the office, go out, come home. And yet this time, one, I was overwhelmed by the idea of being out 4 nights in a row. There's no, I couldn't even fathom it. And I really enjoy being home now, and I'm used to that. And then the effort of commuting, because we work from home right now. So I was like, oh, wow, I have to factor in commuting. Do I want to go into the city? And it really, I think, gives you a different perspective around how you spend your time and the ways that you choose to build those connections. And for me, maybe that's why this article really stuck with me. In those moments when I was with someone, I was so happy, and I was like, this is great, and we're connecting, and I really loved it. But also, I understood like how it could be overwhelming and awkward, And we really have to be intentional about it and to like make those decisions so that, as we start to move in person more and networking, defining what's going to work for us in this world in which we currently live.
I think the key word that you just said there is intentional, right? Like figure out what works for you and then make sure that whatever you're using your energy towards is worth it. And that can be, I'm here in London right now. And to be honest, I've barely seen my friends. And I do have friends here because my energy, I am intentionally spending it with my family. And when I get back in this fall, I know I will intentionally be using some of my time and energy to be part of our squads program because I want to meet other people in the community who are who have that same mentality. Usually, and we've talked about our squad programs. We've talked about how we twice a year we run this program where we put together cohorts of women in our community, and they get to talk 30 minutes a week via Zoom and get to know each other, get to tackle different issues, tackle their career problems. But the people who join squads, I would say, are people who are going into this with a very, very clear intention of, I want to build these relationships. I want to know other great people. I want to help them get to their goals and learn from them.
Yeah, I appreciate you saying that. I was thinking about that this week when it was the last meeting for my squad. So we run squads twice a year, and we're just finishing up the spring squads now. We are on hiatus over the summer, and then we start back up in the fall. And even though it starts in the fall, we do take applications, or you need to sign up for the fall squads in June and July. Because we have a whole algorithm, a matching process. We're connecting you with peers and peers that have similar availability day and week to you. And so there's a lot of magic that goes into creating these squads. But this week was my last squad for this cycle. And it was really interesting because, it's been 12 meetings, over 3 months. And it was really moving. We were all talking about what we had gotten out of the squad and what we had learned and how we'd made progress on the goal that we or the challenge that we laid out in our hot seat. And it was pretty deep and pretty emotional. And you see the bonds that can form. And even though we were just talking about the in-person connection, which is incredibly valuable and something that I think many of us are yearning for, in the squads program, which is virtual, it felt like it mimicked that. I mean, it felt as if we were in the same room. It was so intimate. It was so real. And the one thing that, was very meaningful to me was I was connecting with other executives. And let's be honest, there's not enough women executives in business. We need more. But I was connecting with other executives in different industries, but also across the world. And that was great because I would not have met them at a local networking event or a local outing. So I was able to meet someone that I probably wouldn't have otherwise. And I gained so much knowledge and insights from them. So it was really, a special experience. And I encourage all of our listeners to join a squad. You should absolutely do it. EllevateNetwork.com/squads. Register now, sign up, don't delay. It's super easy. But it really is a great way to connect with others, to get that advice, to hold yourself accountable to every single week over the fall and into the winter, to achieve your goals, to be the manager, leader, business owner, executive that you strive to be. And we know it's always a work in progress, and you need those people that have your back and can help guide you on that journey.
Absolutely. Definitely apply for a squad. We have applications open until July 13th, so don't miss out.
Our guest today, AnneMarie ONeill, is the CEO of Whalerock, an LA-based media company that produces content for TV and digital media and advises other brands on media strategy, creative development, and production. And this was an interview that you did, Maricella.
Yeah, she was great. She has a very interesting story, lots of really great advice. I think you're going to love her.
I cannot wait. Let's get to Maricella's interview with AnneMarie.
Hi, AnneMarie. Thank you so much for being here at the Ellevate podcast. So excited to have you on as a guest today.
Thank you, Maricella. Thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here.
So we always like to start it a little broad. So tell us a little bit about you and how you got to where you are today.
Wow. Okay.
I know.
Big questions first. Well, I guess most noticeably, I am from Australia, although I have lived and worked in the US for many years. So, as we continue our conversation, you'll probably hear a hybrid accent coming in and out. And, my career has not taken a linear path. I actually started out as a journalist working for Murdoch's newspapers in Sydney. Some of them were tabloids, which in the 90s was an interesting environment for a young woman starting out, or anyone starting out. Many stories, but let's just call it feudal and leave it there.
It makes me curious, but I can see how that would be a very interesting spot to be working in.
If you imagine Australian tabloid newsroom in the 90s, I don't think I really need to say more. There was a lot of yelling, a lot of going to the pub, a lot of boys club activity. But, it certainly made anyone who came into that environment quite resilient. So I have a lot to thank for. When I actually moved across to Time magazine in Sydney, I was very excited to have things like my own rubbish bin and,
oh wow,
a spoon for the coffee that wasn't changed to the sink. So, there were
So you really moved up in the world.
I had really moved up in the world. I had an office with a view, and I had my own spoon. It was incredible. So yeah, I was really very fortunate. I was in my early 20s, and I really scored what then was my dream job. So, and I got that job the hard way. I would say that the subsequent positions I've had have come a little more easily, but that job was the job where I decided I wanted to leave the newspaper world, and I sent out 30 or 40 resumes to everyone I could think of back in the day of literally mailing paper resumes. So I'm aging myself. And a job came up at Time magazine for someone quite senior that I threw myself into the ring anyway, and they were like, well, you're obviously too junior for this job, but we have this other thing going on. So that was where I kind of started on the path in magazines that led me to the US. And I was recruited by Time Inc. to work in New York, and I've spent 15 years working in publishing in New York City, which was really fun, an incredible time and an incredible learning experience. And then I moved across to LA and made my way into digital media and production, and ultimately wound up running a company.
Amazing. I do want to go back to a little bit to something you just said, which was you threw yourself into a ring for a position that was pretty senior. And I absolutely love that. And we hear too much how women tend to not go for the big jobs. We feel like we have to have, I don't know, if there's 10 requirements for the job, we have to have 10 out of 10 versus men who could go in and throw their hat in the ring with like 5 or 6 out of 10. What made you what gave you the confidence to put yourself out there, and what would you suggest, or what would you say to listeners who are kind of struggling with this, like a little bit of the I don't know if I'm ready for this, but maybe you just should, because it can open other avenues?
The short answer is youth, but I think you make a really good point, because I think sometimes I think back on my younger years starting out after college and going into the workforce and being single and kind of with all of my girlfriends living in houses together and working in places together. And I think, wow, I wish I could recapture some of that confidence. And it was this kind of fresh ignorance that served us really well. And I'm not saying that we all need to go through life being ignorant, but I do think that as we move on through our career, it's easy to get a little beaten down and to lose some of that optimism. And to be clear, when I went for that job, I really wasn't considering that I would get that senior position, but I wanted to be noticed by the hiring managers, and that was a way in. So that was my kind of entry point into that world, without necessarily the expectation of getting that senior job. But one of the things that was different, and I think that could be recaptured by people listening to this podcast if they're feeling that way, one of the things to be recaptured is that sense of not caring what other people think, if you not having any shame around applying for something that may be considered above your level. You might be surprised, and people might think, well, actually, you're right at that level. You have so many of the qualities that I need in this particular position. But I also think that if you're not at that level, there's no shame in it. There's no shame in trying. People aren't going to judge you.
100%. And like you said, like, I love that you went through this path thinking, well, this is my way in. This is my way to start getting noticed by the hiring manager, maybe build a relationship with that person. You played the long game, and I think it's just smart.
It was probably accidental, but it worked out to be smart in the long run.
So now you're the CEO of Whalerock. Tell me a little bit about what you guys do at Whalerock.
So Whalerock is a cross-platform media and entertainment company. We have a digital division, we have a TV production studio, and we have a new podcast production division. We produce all kinds of things. We have entertainment, media brands. We are in partnership with Adam Savage, who was known as the Mythbusters guy. Adam has a brand called Tested, which we run for him, which is a big YouTube brand. In the TV world, we're probably best known for the TV show BattleBots, which is on Discovery, and formerly was on ABC. We have had several other shows on CNN and Netflix and various other big networks and streamers. And our new podcast division is called Echoverse, and it is a scripted sci-fi and genre podcast production studio. And we've signed on shows with Minnie Driver and Alison Kill. So we've got a really fun year coming up in production there.
That's so exciting. So scripted shows on podcasts.
Scripted podcasts, unscripted TV, and a kind of variety of digital media products, which are really digital media properties, which are really brands that we've had for a long time. The company's been through several evolutions over the last 10 years or so, where we went heavily into digital, building apps and having engineers working with us, and then kind of moved further into leaning into the IP side of business.
Interesting. What made you switch to more of the digital media space from like journalism and more traditional media stuff?
I think, especially being in New York, you probably had an eyewitness seat to how the industry of journalism and publishing has shrunk.
Yeah.
The contraction began, and I saw it coming and decided to quite proactively move out of print publishing, even though I loved and still love it, into the digital world, which, when I did move across probably 10 or 12 years ago now, probably 10-ish years ago, was really a burgeoning space for journalism and really for anyone who loved the written word. And then, of course, it became the video space and the audio space. And so I've had a huge learning curve over the last 10 years.
And you did get into it when the industry was coming up and starting to really develop, like you said. So I'm sure you've learned and unlearned a bunch of things by now.
It's the media and entertainment space has changed so rapidly and regularly over the last decade. It's almost given us whiplash. And I think, being a small company, trying to keep up with that has required a lot of change management, a lot of strategic pivots. And I think that you have to change to keep up in this industry. You can't just dig into one thing and keep going. You really have to innovate.
So how do you manage, like, how do you get used to this change though? Or how do you, I don't know, I'm a little change averse. So it's interesting to me to see how people can really adapt quickly, right? And we certainly saw it in the last 2 years, how we've all had to adapt. So I'm kind of curious of how you've managed that such a rapid pace of change.
Yeah, that's a good question. It really has been a long period of scaling up, then paring down, and then turnarounds, and then pivots, and much more so than I honestly expected. And then the pandemic thrown in for good measure.
Yeah.
And I would say, in terms of being able to feel comfortable with change and being able to be a company that grows and adapts with change, and a leader that grows a company and adapts with change, the key for me is to always be as transparent and communicative as possible. So communicate early and often. If there is a big change that needs to happen in your company for your company to get to the next level, and you know that that's going to impact people, especially if it's going to require layoffs or restructuring or strategic partnerships or changes to ranks and divisions, which is all a part of that change management, communicate early and often. That has been kind of my way of living and working over the past several years. And sometimes it's really hard.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes it's really hard to confront issues before you've figured it all out. And sometimes it feels like dangerous territory. And I often say to my executive team, this policy of transparency is double-edged, because when you're transparent with people, sometimes it scares them.
Yes.
And sometimes it creates turmoil and anxiety in a moment where you're really just trying to be honest and truthful. I will say that ultimately, having practiced this almost religiously over the last several years, over time, it is always better for people to know what's coming and to know it as soon as possible, because then there is trust and loyalty built in for those who are staying, and there is trust and loyalty built in for those who may be leaving an organization, and that is valuable for the rest of your career. That is valuable for life. And it may be hard in the moment, you may cause some turmoil in the moment, but ultimately individuals always appreciate that you are straight with them.
I 100% agree with you. I think that transparency, even like vulnerability within leadership, is something that's so important, because that's the only way you can actually build trust with your employees. And like you said, it's better for them to know things sooner rather than later. And sometimes it might be a hard decision to make, but the transparency is very, very valuable.
Yeah. And, loyalty is the greatest currency that a leader can have, because there'll be times in your company, and many companies experience them over the pandemic, ours included. There'll be times where you have to turn around to your people and say, hey, the executives need to take a pay cut so that we don't have to let anybody go. And we did that at Whalerock, and we didn't let anyone go through the entire pandemic. And we did it because everyone was ready to be loyal to each other and to really just make that little sacrifice in their own lives. And for some, I'm sure it felt like a really big sacrifice, but to kind of keep the team strong and together. You can't do that if you don't have that currency of loyalty already built up.
Yep. And that's a big thing. And you saying this is what we did for, and these are the reasons, just adds to that loyalty, right? Like, it does put people at ease that this leadership team, the CEO and the executive team, care about the rest of the company, care about what's happening.
Yeah, and that has to often be balanced with caring about your investors and your obligation to your investors, right? So it's all a rich tapestry when you're trying to figure that all out.
What has been the biggest challenge you think, or not biggest challenge, but the biggest, I like asking kind of what has been the biggest lesson you've learned as you transition, as you started with your career. I saw you started within Whalerock and in other categories, but then became CEO now. So how do you see that trajectory, and what was like the biggest lesson learned as you were coming up to this role?
I would say the biggest lesson is probably one of humility. As you are switching roles in particular. It's really, I feel like I have gained so much by being a sponge and listening to other people. So I think that background as a journalist, which I used to kind of almost, I used to be a little on the back foot about that background because I didn't get an MBA. I was on the job trained to become first a COO and then a CEO. But I've realized in hindsight, actually, that curiosity and communication and the ability to ask questions and listen and distill information has been one of the greatest assets of my career. And the humility comes into it because you can't go into a room every day pretending you know everything. You don't. And I am really comfortable with asking questions that will come across as stupid questions. And I try not to label them stupid questions. And I try, especially when a female employee says, this is a stupid question, but I always stop them.
I love that.
There are no stupid questions. And, to have the humility to ask a question and learn the answer is probably one of the big lessons I've had over the past several years.
And that's so important. And like, honestly, on the job training and learning on the job is so hard. But it makes such a difference too, I think, if you can like understand all the different parts of what you're working on. The generalist aspect very much clicked with me. I am a complete generalist. I was a finance person, gave that up years ago. And it's sometimes like you said, I sometimes feel kind of like, is this the right fit? Am I too much of a generalist? What is this leading me to? But I see you can find your way.
Yeah, and I do worry a little bit coming out of the pandemic, knowing how I was able to get through with asking all the questions and absorbing all the information. It's really hard to do that as a young person working remotely.
Yeah,
and I worry a little that the kind of up and coming generation of women in business and women in their careers are going to suffer a little bit from not being around people day to day. So I think it's really important for people in more senior positions to reach out and to make those spaces for people who are more junior in the workplace to learn and ask questions and absorb information about things that are outside of their day-to-day lane.
That's actually a really great point. So I was reading about how the flex work and remote work some people are questioning it as, will it become the new mommy path? Because you're not going to be showing face necessarily. And the people who are going to most likely take up the flexible work arrangements or stay at home, like work from home arrangements, are women. And so will this hurt women as we move from the pandemic and people start forgetting that we can all work from home and it's still productive?
Yeah, I'm in two minds about it. I mean, I love the flexibility of working remotely. I miss being in an office with people, but I'm at a certain point in my career where I've still got so much to learn, but I'm at a point in my career that if I recognize something I need to learn, I can call someone and ask them. There's not so much of that learning by osmosis that happens when you're starting out in your career and you're just maybe sitting around after work and having a late night closing a deal, or you're, just at the water cooler, or you're heading out to a spontaneous lunch. There's just so much more opportunity for connection and learning and mentoring that I think is missing, and it has to be a little more manufactured now.
So what do you think companies should do to create these spaces?
So I think if a company is going to be fully remote, then there are a lot of tactics that are possible. So, creating a mentoring program that's actually a little more maybe a little more formal than your company would have done if everyone was in the same space together every day. Creating those connections in a more formal way, something as simple as lunch and learns. There are many different ways that are just part of the corporate lexicon, if you like, for bringing people together. I think that it feels a little forced to people on Zoom sometimes. So, creating opportunities, especially when we're kind of in this moment where people can actually see each other in person, creating more in-person opportunities for people to get together, even if it's just socials, after work drinks or coffees or lunches, creating more of those social spaces and social opportunities for people to just get to know their colleagues and get to know their more senior collaborators and just kind of pick it up on the job, because it's difficult when everything has to be so formalized.
Yeah. I think it gives a different pressure. It puts a little different pressure on interactions, I think.
It's true. And, I found too when in the Zoom world, there's no, I'll just pop into someone's office and ask them a question. And when you're the CEO of the company and you're asking someone to pop onto a Zoom, it's like being called to the principal's office, no matter how good your culture is. And we have a very friendly culture, great community. But it's like, come to the principal's office so she can ask you a 2-minute question. Whereas if I just pop my head in, then it's a completely different vibe altogether.
Yeah, absolutely. We've started doing, so Slack has the huddle option, so you can like call someone.
Yeah, I like that.
Which is easier than being, you're right. It's totally the feeling of like, I'm being called to the principal's office right now.
Well, everything had to be an appointment for a while there. I do like that Slack feature. I think it's great.
Yeah, we were using a lot of huddles. We have also we also tried the like, you can pop into a team meeting of another team, but that kind of became awkward when we were just in the middle of a meeting and someone randomly popped in on Zoom.
Yeah, I can see how that would be weird.
We were really trying to recreate the office environment, but failed a little.
I know. And didn't we all do so well with our happy hours and our pub trivia quizzes? And then everyone just got tired.
Yeah. I mean, it's been long. It's been very long. I want to change gears a little bit because I know we're going to be out of time soon. But tell me about working in entertainment. I am so curious. I know you've worked with a lot of celebrity influencers and some really, really cool people. So would really like to hear a little bit about that and how the culture is, or what I don't know, what's challenging, what's easy, what's fun.
I guess over the years I've kind of brushed up against a lot of celebrities and worked in entertainment either as a journalist or as in my recent career in digital media. It's fun, it's fun. And it's just like the magazines say, celebrities are people like us, it's not, I think if you've been working in the industry for a long time, there's a lot less wonder around the famous people. Mm-hmm. But there's also a lot of, there is a lot of machinery around the famous people, and there's a lot of machinery around the entertainment industry, which is different from, say, the publishing industry or even the advertising industry or other kind of parts of the media. And navigating that machine can be interesting and tricky. Sometimes the trickiest people are the people around the talent. Sometimes the trickiest people are their lawyers or managers or agents or parents. So it's a constant lesson in diplomacy, is what I would say.
Yeah, I mean, I'm reading here a little bit about what you produced. You said Tested, HBO's Pursuit of Happiness, and a lot of emoji and some emoji keyboards that I thought were it's just fascinating. I did not know there was a Kim Kardashian emoji keyboard.
The Kimoji keyboard we produced several years ago, and it's actually been phased out now, but it was awesome. It was so much fun. So we ran the direct-to-consumer apps for the Kardashian-Jenners for several years when they had those businesses, and we produced the Kimoji keyboard back when, new and different emoji keyboards were a brand new thing, and it literally broke the App Store. And it was really racy, and as you can imagine,
I wouldn't expect anything less.
And it was a lot of fun, and we also did them for the Lakers and the NFL Players Association, and we produced direct consumer apps for Zendaya and Tyler the Creator. So the company over the years has done many different things.
Yeah, it looks like you've been in different arenas, and keep expanding considering you're doing the podcast production now, and it's cool. It's cool to see how a company can adapt and change and flow depending on how the market flows, especially in such a fast-paced market.
Yeah, the adaptation has been our strong suit, I'd say, over the last decade.
I don't want to take a lot more of your time, but I would be remiss if I didn't go into our lightning round. But before that, anything you want to share with the audience that we didn't get to? Anything you want me to ask you specifically that you want to talk about?
I guess not really. I would say if there was one thing to leave your listeners with in terms of advice, I would just say, especially at this moment in time, as a leader or as someone aspiring to be a leader, come as you are. That, I think, is one of the most important lessons in management that we have learned over the past several years with everything that we've been through. Come as you are, be transparent, communicate early and often, and be yourself, and people will appreciate that vulnerability that you bring to the job. And people are still going through it. That's the other thing, is don't think that this is over. This is not like flipping a switch. People are still disoriented. The world of work is different, but no one really has the answer for what that's going to look like. So, hopefully with everything crossed, I would say the pandemic may be almost over, but the experience of the pandemic is not. And we as leaders and as workers and as humans have to really understand that and not expect everybody to just kind of jump back to where they were.
That's great advice. And you just said it, as leaders and humans, that authenticity, that transparency, and just remembering that we're all going through a lot is so important. I'm going to start with our lightning round. So I'm going to ask you questions. You can answer in one sentence or less. And here we go. Introvert or extrovert?
I'd say extrovert with an introvert rising. I love to be around people, but I also really cherish my alone time.
I like that. Favorite day of the week?
Saturdays. Saturdays are for sleep-ins.
Yeah. Early bird or night owl?
I'll reference my Saturdays are for sleep-ins. I am a night owl masquerading as an early bird by necessity. So I get up early, but I love to stay up late.
See, I'm a night owl, and I've been trying to masquerade, but it just does not happen to me.
It's hard.
It's really hard. And I have to really change my sleep cycle, because I'm going to have to start training for the New York City Marathon soon. And summers in New York are terrible for running if you don't go out.
Oh, you've got to go so early.
Yeah. Top self-care practice?
I force myself to get out of bed early enough to do a daily boot camp Monday to Friday. And then I would say my sleep-in Saturday is also self-care. And I generally every weekend go for a hike with friends.
I love that. You really have your non-negotiables and keep to it. I think it's so important. We all forget, but we need to make time for ourselves.
Even if that time is earlier than you want to get out of bed.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much, AnneMarie, for joining me today and having this lovely chat. I'm really happy I got to interview you and get to know you.
Thank you. You too. Good luck training for the marathon. I'm impressed.
Okay, welcome back, everyone. That conversation was fantastic. I love when Maricella does the interview. She always has such a unique perspective. It's always a good time.
Thank you.
Of course. And I had the great honor of also joining Maricella recently on the Rising Leaders Roundtable. We came together to talk about mobilized women, to share some of the learnings within the community of rising leaders to ensure that they were achieving their goals of creating systemic change within their organizations and supporting others as well as their own careers. So that was fun. Thanks for having me, Maricella.
Well, thanks for being there, Kristy. You're always so fantastic at guiding these conversations. Everyone got so much out of it. And also, I was so happy you were there because my computer kept crashing. So I didn't have to worry about it because I knew there was a pro there ready.
Oh yeah, we had a team in place. What is it? One of our values is it's like don't freak out or something. Just
we get stuff done without freaking out.
Yeah. So we got it done. But I mean, thank you for saying that about me being a moderator. But I would also say that just the community was so engaged in the conversation that all I had to do was just help guide it. It was pretty spectacular, and clearly a lot of those topics resonated with our community. We were talking about, business as a force for good and how we as consumers support businesses that are being very thoughtful about their supply chain, about their workforce, about their impact in the world. We talked about why they stay and companies' role, specifically managers within companies' role of helping to retain employees by creating inclusive and supportive workplaces. We talked about mental health, about online ethics. I mean, there's a whole array of conversations, but really centered around business. And why this is so important is within each of our roundtables, if it's the entrepreneur roundtable, the rising leaders, or the executives, we're bringing together a cross-section of individuals who are passionate about not only succeeding in their career, but seeing others succeed and creating workplaces that work for all. And we know that that's not the reality today, but we believe very strongly that we can get to that reality. And it's going to take a group effort. It's going to take companies who invest in this, employees across the organization and the org chart, but it is attainable and it's possible. And so we bring people together in these roundtables to really talk about, me, what do I need to succeed? If it's, getting on a board or public speaking or, another goal you may have. What does this company need? How do I best support my team and my organization in creating a successful and, supportive and amazing place that people want to work and world? What is our greater impact in this world? And we know the world is changing and it impacts all of us. And it's hard sometimes to find spaces to have those conversations. If it's talking about the recession or talking about violence, racism, talking about, the war in Ukraine. I mean, there's so many things that are happening that impact us as business leaders and as professionals. And we want to create those spaces for those conversations because we know that that doesn't oftentimes happen within companies. So we encourage all of our listeners to join us at an upcoming roundtable. You'll find something for you, for your company, and for your impact on the world. The upcoming executive roundtable is What You Say and What I Hear, Women and Men in Workplace Conversations. So really talking about, mansplaining or someone talking over you, how to navigate some of those conversations successfully to ensure that your voice is heard. At the Rising Leaders Roundtable, we will be covering how to get out of your own way, which is critically important. I think especially as we think about squads later this fall, what are the ways in which maybe you're self-sabotaging or holding yourself back, and how do you get out of your way and move forward? And at the Business Owners Roundtable, we will be covering moving into high gear to drive your business forward. So a lot here around momentum, around creating change, and that's what we're all about here at Ellevate. So join an upcoming roundtable. We want to see you. It'll be a great experience to really build that habit and that muscle of getting advice, building a community, tapping into those connections and networks. And then don't forget to sign up for our Squads program, which will be starting this fall.
100%. The roundtables are also a great place to start honing those skills and, getting comfortable with sharing information and sharing yourself with others. And Squads is where you get to dive deep. So they're very complementary.
Yes. So we would be remiss if we did not cover some firsts. We always want to celebrate the change makers in our world. I will kick us off with Rose Zhang, who became the first student athlete to sign an NIL endorsement agreement with Adidas.
Sabrina Francis became the first Black woman to hold a cabinet position in the Camden Borough of London, England.
Anne Allied became Australia's Minister of Youth, making her the first Muslim woman to serve in the country's cabinet.
Victoria Khan became the first woman to oversee New Jersey's prison system.
Gitanjali Shree became the first Hindi author to win the International Booker Prize.
And Andrea Campbell became the first Black woman to pass the signature threshold for statewide office in Massachusetts.
Oh, there's always one that really hits me hard, and I think that was it. Maybe this time, where you just are like, "Wait, what?
Yep,
that has to be a typo. There's got to be something wrong." But we're gonna keep celebrating these firsts, and it is a celebration because just as we were talking about with the roundtables and the change that happens from one person learning from another, bringing that back to their organization. Change is happening here. We see it across the board in these firsts, and it's showing us it's possible and giving us that inspiration. So share your first with us, what you're celebrating. Feel free to tag us on social media, Ellevate Network, #EllevatePod. We want to hear from you. And next week, we have a really important interview, something I was honored to do this interview and really inspired by our guest. So Yulia Mamonova is in her day job. She has 5+ years in digital marketing as head of content at Lemon.io, where she's focused on growth and communication. She's written over 1,500 pieces and is reshaping the world of fintech startups and content marketing with her skills. But in her personal life, and it seeps into her professional life. When we talk about this in the interview, Yulia is from Ukraine, and her family and loved ones have enrolled to fight in the war. She's currently not living in Ukraine, but she's seen how her company has stepped up to support customers, to support employees during this time, to provide money and resources. She's very active in ways that we, wherever you are, can support Ukrainians and to support the end of the war and to, really lead with your wallet, lead with your values, lead with your voice. There's so many things that we can each individually do. And just hearing from Yulia and these personal and real stories left a deep mark on me, and I know it will on our listeners. So join us back here next week for a conversation with Yulia, and we'll see you then. Thanks so much for listening to Ellevate. If you like what you hear, help a girl out. Subscribe to the Ellevate podcast on iTunes, give us 5 stars, and share your review. Also, don't forget to follow us on Twitter at EllevateNTWK, that's Ellevate Network. And become a member. You can learn all about membership and all the great things that Ellevate Network is doing at our website, www.ellevatenetwork.com. That's ELLEVATE network.com. And special thanks to our producer, Catherine Heller. She rocks. And to our voiceover artist, Rachel Griesinger. Thanks so much, and join us next week.